In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on February 14, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start. If you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Maryland versus Rutgers. Maryland heads to Rutgers on Sunday, February 15, 2026, for a Big Ten lunchtime scrap that feels more like a grudge match than a simple mid-season checkpoint. Rutgers comes back home trying to stop a 7-game slide, sitting at 9-15-0 overall and 2-11-0 in league play, while Maryland has inched its way to 10-14-0 and 3-10-0 after back-to-back wins over Minnesota and a ranked Iowa team under first-year head coach Buzz Williams. That alone sets the tone, one team trying to remember what winning feels like and the other just starting to believe that this new version of itself might actually work. Maryland is basically a portal-built patchwork that is finally starting to look like a real, cohesive group instead of a collection of strangers in the same jersey. The rotation has tightened around Andre Mills, Darius Adams, Solomon Washington, Elijah Saunders, Colin Metcalf, and the spark plug guard David Coit, which gives the Terps a clear identity on most possessions. Miles Rice and Farrell Payne sit in that uncomfortable questionable bucket, and Rakees Passmore is done for the year with an Achilles injury, so this is not a deep team, but sometimes a shorter bench forces a coach to lean into clarity instead of chaos. You can almost feel it when you watch them. Fewer wasted touches, fewer your turn, my turn, possessions, more trips where everyone seems to know what the plan is before the ball crosses half court. Rutgers, on the other hand, still has its core pieces available in Tariq Francis, Dylan Grant, and Emmanuel Ogboli, and Francis carrying about 16.5 points per night gives the Knights a go-to-score that looks good on paper. The problem is that the rest of the rotation has frayed around the edges, with Lino Mark and Javonte Ware sitting as questionable, Bay Fall already out after hand surgery, and Dorian Jones redshirting, so the safety net is pretty thin if the first wave struggles. In a home building that can get loud fast, that sort of shaky depth can be a blessing or a curse, and lately it has leaned toward pressure rather than freedom. Instead of playing loose, Rutgers often feels like it is playing not to make the next mistake, which is a tough vibe to cover a number with, especially when the opponent has started to figure itself out. Stat-wise, Maryland scores around 72 points per game on a bit over 41% from the field and about 32% from deep, while Rutgers sits close to 70 points, roughly 41% shooting and a similar 32% from long range. None of that screams powerhouse, but it does tell you this matchup will probably reward the team that can manufacture ugly points rather than the one that needs pretty ones. Maryland has leaned into that reality by getting to the free throw line more than 23 times per game and hitting around 72.4% when it gets there, which is not glamorous, but in tight games that steady parade to the stripe feels like a cheat code. Rutgers, in contrast, has lived with long scoring droughts in Big Ten play, and those dry spells have a bad habit of showing up right when a favorite is supposed to pull away. The history between these two does not really give Rutgers the comfort of we always get them at home either. Maryland has taken the last 3 meetings and has covered the number in all 3, and the series over the last 10 is dead even at 5 wins to 5 losses, which sounds about right for how these programs punch at each other. Honestly, that kind of recent track record tends to sit in the back of players' minds, even if they swear it does not, because confidence in these spots is often borrowed from what you have already done against the same jersey. Here, the supposed safety of the home favorite collides with a visiting group that has less to lose, a clearer late-game pecking order, and a coach who looks very comfortable tightening the screws in close spots. Books still lean toward Rutgers with that small home favorite tag, but when you line up current form, free throw reliability, recent head-to-head results, and the emotional temperature of both locker rooms, the underdog feels much more likely to hang around, trade punches, and make that short number look a little too generous by the final horn. As our first pick for this matchup, the Maryland Terrapins to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Maryland has been giving up around 78.6 points per game on about 47.3% shooting and roughly 37.4% from three. Rutgers is not much stingier, allowing around 76.4 points, 45.8% from the field, and about 37.7% from deep. On first glance, that looks like an invitation to a shootout, but the way these teams actually interact with each other tells a very different story. 8 of the last 10 meetings between Maryland and Rutgers have landed under the total, and even in the recent wins Maryland has banked in this series, the combined scores have hovered in the low 130s instead of ballooning upward. That pattern is not a fluke so much as a reflection of how both teams naturally drag each other into slower, grind-heavy games. Neither offense is built around silky ball movement or constant cutting. Both lean heavily on individual creators trying to make something out of a late clock situation, which naturally shaves possessions off the game. Assist numbers sit on the low side compared to a lot of modern offenses, and when guards spend a lot of trips staring at a teammate, then the clock, then the defender, you usually get more clanks and fewer fireworks. Shooting percentages back that up. Maryland sits around 41.2% from the floor and about 32.1% from deep. Rutgers is at about 41% from the field and roughly 32.2% from three, which is perfectly respectable but not exactly the profile of two teams ready to trade haymaker runs for 40 minutes. Here is the thing, with that kind of efficiency, it does not take much. A few empty trips, a cold stretch from a key scorer, one whistle-heavy stretch where both sides stall for a supposedly high-scoring script to sag. In the Big Ten, you see it all the time. The first 4 minutes are loose and fun, then the game tightens, every cut gets bumped, and suddenly both teams are living in a half-court staring contest. Depth and health point toward a slower rhythm as well. Maryland still has Miles Rice and Farrell Payne listed as questionable and Ray Keys Passmore out for the year, while Rutgers is juggling the absences of Bay Fall and the questionable tags on Lino Mark and Javonte Ware, with Dorian Jones sitting on a red shirt. Neither staff is eager to turn this into a track meet when the benches are already a bit stretched and the season is wearing on legs and lungs. Conservative rotations usually mean more deliberate possessions, more emphasis on half-court sets, and less appetite for trading quick shots, especially when both teams know each other's plays almost by heart at this point in the calendar. Series familiarity matters a lot for totals. By now, the scouting reports are thick, and both coaches know the other's pet actions, late-game wrinkles, and preferred counters. That kind of familiarity tends to squeeze efficiency on offense, not inflate it. It is very easy for fans to see the raw defensive numbers and expect something wild, but when you stack the recent series trend, the shooting percentages, the deliberate guard play, and the injury-shaped rotations, this matchup still looks far more like a first to 70 wins kind of scrap than a free-flowing highlight reel. So while the posted number sits higher than what these teams usually produce against each other, everything about how they play, how they are built right now, and how February Big Ten games tend to feel suggests a total that finishes below where that number is set. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Indiana versus Illinois. On paper, this kind of matchup looks like the classic setup where everyone leans straight toward the highly ranked home side without even thinking twice. Big name, loud building, national TV, and a fan base that has been circling this date on the calendar for a while. It feels like the sort of game where casual bettors open their app, see the marquee logo at home, and just tap it with a smile. The favorite has built that reputation for a reason. They move the ball, they shoot with confidence, and when the crowd gets rolling, that offense can feel like it is coming in waves. Every run seems to start the same way, a transition three here, a putback there, and suddenly the opponent is staring at a double-digit hole while the student section is losing its mind. From a pure talent perspective, the favorite looks deeper, longer, and more polished across the rotation, the kind of group that has been living in the rankings and hearing all season that a conference title is there for them if they just keep pushing. That is the surface view, and it is very tempting. But underneath that shiny cover, there is a little more noise. The favorite has been through some emotional grinders lately, stretches of extra basketball, tight finishes, and pressure possessions stacking up on tired legs. Key perimeter pieces have carried heavy minutes, some guys have played through bumps and tweaks, and you can sometimes see it in late-game possessions when the first step is a little slower and closeouts arrive just a beat late. Over the course of a long season, that wears on a group, even a very good one. Now look at the underdog and the story feels very different. New coach energy, new system, and a group that has been figuring things out on the fly, and lately the pieces have started to lock in together in a much more confident way. They have that scoring guard who treats big moments like a personal challenge, and you can feel the swagger when he starts hitting from deep and talking a little as he jogs back on defense. The supporting cast stretches the floor, cuts hard, and gives him enough space to cook, which is huge against a favorite that prefers to swallow teams up with length and bodies in the paint. When this underdog is right, they do not look scared in hostile gyms, they look energized by it. And that is exactly the kind of mentality you want when you are catching a healthy number and all you really need to do is keep swinging and keep the margin honest. Put all of that together, and the story becomes less about a coronation for the favorite and more about whether they can actually shake a feisty road team that has the firepower to keep answering and the mindset to keep coming. As our first pick for this matchup, the Indiana Hoosiers to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Two teams that can score, both with players who are not shy about pulling from deep, and a stage that naturally pushes everyone to go for the big highlight. If you just remember a few box scores and some early season non-conference blowouts, your brain immediately pictures a track meet. That is the simple view, and there is some truth in it. These offenses have enough skill to light up a scoreboard when they get comfortable. They can fill a possession with 5-out spacing, quick ball screens, and shooters ready on the weak side, which is exactly what analytics folks on Twitter love to clip and post. In rhythm, either side can hang a huge number in a single half, and if you only look at those peak moments, the idea of a lower scoring game feels almost silly. Here is the thing. This is not a casual Sunday in November. This is deep conference play in the heart of February, and the feel of these games is different. Everyone has film on everyone. Tendencies are mapped out, favorite sets are memorized, and coaching staffs know exactly which actions they want to take away first. You can see it in the way defenders jump passing lanes, in how bigs are already sliding into position before a screen even hits, and in how quickly help comes when a star guard tries to turn the corner. That kind of preparation does not always kill scoring, but it absolutely makes every clean look harder to find. On top of that, the recent grind has been real. The favorite has already been pushed into those extra time battles, which sounds fun until you realize how many extra hard minutes that adds to key legs. Late in the year, jump shots do not always pop off the hand the same way, especially when you are asking the same core to play heavy minutes again and again. Even when injured players come back into the mix, the offense can look a little choppy for a bit, with timing slightly off and roles shifting just enough to matter. It only takes a handful of empty trips on each side, a few slow half-court possessions, for a supposedly wild scoring environment to feel a lot more methodical. Indiana's style in this spot also nudges the game away from a pure sprint. To actually hang around for 40 minutes, they benefit from working the clock, getting into their sets, and making the favorite defend for a full possession instead of bailing them out with rushed early shots. That means more possessions that stretch, more reads, more drives kicked out to shooters instead of forcing tough early looks. And that quietly trims the total number of trips for both sides. You still get bursts of offense, those little runs where it feels like the scoreboard operator cannot keep up. But between those bursts, you can also get long stretches of chess, with both coaches tweaking matchups and players feeling the weight of every miss. So yes, the reputation of both offenses screams points, and on a random night you could absolutely see fireworks. But with the scouting, the recent miles on the favorite, and a likely emphasis on patience from the underdog, the path where this game lands below the expectation is very real and very appealing. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Denver versus Nebraska Omaha. This matchup in Omaha feels like one of those coin flip conference games where the name on the front of the jersey matters less than who handles pressure for 40 minutes. Both teams sit at 13-14 overall and 6-6 in league play, so the records look like a mirror. The home floor gives Nebraska-Omaha a little love, sure, but the deeper you look, the more Denver starts to feel like the side that travels a bit better in this spot. Denver carries a slightly stronger scoring margin, nudging opponents by a touch more on average, even while living in high-tempo games. The Pioneers are putting up over 80 points a night and allowing a similar number, but they do it on cleaner shooting, with that offense humming at close to half their shots going in a very real threat from beyond the arc. Nebraska-Omaha scores less on average and, while dangerous, does not quite hit the same ceiling when the game opens up and turns into a rhythm contest. This is not a matchup built for half-court rock fights. It is the type of game where it feels like the first group into the 80s, and sometimes even the 90s, has the edge, which suits a Denver team that is used to running and firing. The last time these two saw each other, Omaha had to go up to Denver and sneak out with a 2-point win, and that razor-thin gap fits what the numbers are already whispering. Since that meeting, Denver has found a little groove, taking care of business in 4 of the last 5, and doing it in different gyms rather than just feeding on home comfort. That kind of stretch builds belief in a locker room, especially when some of those wins come on the road in tricky conference environments that are not exactly postcard destinations. Denver leans on a guard-led attack that feels portable from building to building, with a primary scorer who lives around the high teens to 20 points per night, stretches the floor from deep, and cashes in at the stripe when whistles blow. Behind him, a group of experienced forwards handles the dirty work, cleaning the glass and finishing plays at a high clip near the rim. On the other side, Omaha has its own go-to wing and a balanced supporting cast, but the Mavs deal with many of the same turnover issues that Denver does, and they do not clearly force the Pioneers into something unfamiliar. So when you strip away the labels and just line up the profiles, you see equal records, nearly equal margins, Denver riding better form, and a previous meeting that came down to a single bucket, which makes grabbing the underdog with the points feel more like common sense than a hot take. As our first pick for this matchup, the Denver Pioneers to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Denver games tend to turn into controlled chaos, with the Pioneers scoring in the low 80s on average and giving up almost the same amount, and both sides in their matchups shooting a very healthy percentage from the floor and from long range. Nebraska-Omaha is not shy either, sitting in the high 70s on both offense and defense, and also living in that efficient shooting neighborhood where good looks rarely go to waste. When you put those tendencies together, you get a matchup where the natural rhythm of the game already leans toward a high-scoring feel, even before you start talking about specific numbers on a board. Both offenses lean into a modern style, spacing the floor, taking a solid volume of threes, and getting to the free throw line often enough that the clock can stop while the scoreboard keeps moving. Denver knocks down a strong number of triples per game at an impressive clip and hits free throws at a rate that coaches love when they draw up late-game situations. Omaha answers with its own steady stream of made threes and consistent trips to the stripe, so you rarely feel like either side is out of scoring options when a possession bogs down. That kind of shot profile, with a lot of threes and a lot of free throws, is exactly what you want when you are hoping for a game that does not stall out. Defensively, neither team screams shutdown. Denver sits on the wrong side of the turnover margin, without a big spike in steals to bail them out, which means opponents are usually able to get into their actions and find comfortable looks. Omaha has its own issues there, also losing the turnover battle on average and tending to give up more threes than it makes. That is how you end up with stretches where both teams trade clean shots rather than forcing each other into ugly heaves late in the shot clock. The previous meeting between these two already told a clear story, landing in the mid-160s in combined points, and that was not some double overtime marathon, it was just the natural flow of how they play. Since then, Omaha has been involved in more high-scoring affairs at home, including a game where both teams flirted with the century mark, while Denver has dropped big numbers on the road and kept that offensive identity steady. Honestly, when you watch this kind of Summit League matchup, it feels less like a defensive chess match and more like a scoring showcase where both sides take turns punching and rarely hold back. So if this one follows the same script, with pace, spacing, and shot making all front and center, it sets up as the kind of contest where rooting for a lot of points makes perfect sense. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Oakland versus Robert Morris. Oakland and Robert Morris meet in one of those league games where the number basically shrugs and lets the two teams sort it out themselves. Robert Morris has the home court, the crowd, and the memory of that big win in the first meeting, so on the surface it looks like the safer side. The Colonials have been strong in that building, piling up home wins and feeding off that familiar gym feel that college teams love so much. They come in steady, confident, and very comfortable with who they are, which always matters when the spread is small and the margins are thin. Oakland, though, refuses to fit neatly into the underdog box here. Their season record is not perfect, but it puts them right in the mix at the top of the conference, and they are far from a team just trying to hang around. They play a style that travels, with an offense that can explode in stretches and a front court that battles on the board, so they do not need everything to go right from the perimeter to stay competitive. That is the kind of profile you want when you are catching a short number on the road, a group that can survive a cold shooting spell and still hang around long enough to swing things late. The first meeting between these teams turned into a blowout, and that result is still echoing in every basic matchup page right now. Robert Morris ran away with it on the scoreboard, and it would be easy to let that single game write the whole story. But buried inside that scoreline is a wild free throw count for Oakland, with a huge chunk of their points coming from the stripe in a whistle-heavy game that did not feel like a normal pace script as much as a parade to the line. When a box score leans that hard on fouls, it can twist how a final score looks, and it can quietly inflate perceptions of separation between two teams that are actually closer than that one night suggests. Since that meeting, Oakland has been quietly rewarding anyone willing to back them. They have put together a strong run against the number, especially away from home, and that is usually a sign that the market is still a tick slow to adjust to how competitive they really are. They keep finding ways to stay inside numbers, whether through late offense, rebounding stretches, or simple toughness in tight finishes. Robert Morris, for their part, has been cashing tickets too, especially in this recent stretch, and that is what makes this feel less like a mismatch and more like a coin flip where you would rather be grabbing than laying. In matchups like this, the small details tilt the scales. Oakland comes in with the memory of that ugly home loss, the benefit of already seeing Robert Morris's actions, and the knowledge that their own offensive ceiling still gives them multiple paths to cover even if the game does not turn into a perfect performance. Their ability to generate points in transition, then shift into half-court sets, and then still get to the line when needed, all stacks up nicely when you are asking them simply to hang tight and punch back for 40 minutes. That revenge angle does not guarantee anything, but it adds an edge to a team that already has enough tools to keep this inside a tight spread. As our first pick for this matchup, the Oakland Golden Grizzlies to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The earlier game between these two was a fireworks show on the scoreboard, with the total soaring because of a perfect storm of whistles and constant free throw trips that juiced every possession. When one team keeps walking to the stripe and stacking easy points, any game can suddenly look like a track meet even if the natural flow is not quite that wild. Pull back a bit, and the season patterns tell a more layered story. Oakland games tend to be loud on the scoreboard, with their style pulling games into higher scoring territory on a regular basis. They like tempo, they embrace chaos, and they rarely shy away from a game that turns into a race for buckets. Robert Morris, however, brings a more grounded presence to the scoring environment, a team that can absolutely put up points but also leans on rebounding, defensive structure, and just enough resistance to keep things under control more often than not. Recent form backs that up. Robert Morris has been involved in a steady run of games that have landed on the quieter side of the total, with several contests finding themselves in ranges that feel more controlled than explosive. Their work on the glass, combined with a defense that contests effectively and limits second chances, keeps opponents from turning every miss into a fast break. Oakland has also seen a handful of games lately tilt towards lower totals than their reputation might suggest, especially as the calendar inches deeper into the season and teams know each other better. There is also the rematch effect to consider. When teams see each other again, coaches adjust, scouting reports sharpen, and players remember exactly where they got burned the first time. For Oakland, that likely means more discipline defensively, fewer needless fouls, and more emphasis on forcing Robert Morris to score over a set defense instead of in free-flowing, whistle-driven chaos. For Robert Morris, it can mean tightening the rotation, valuing possessions a bit more, and leaning into that rebounding strength to control tempo without fully throttling back their own offense. All of that points to a game that can still be entertaining and competitive without needing to turn into another extreme scoreboard show. The market perception, shaped heavily by that first high-scoring meeting and Oakland's reputation, leans toward expecting another big number, but the recent undertrends and the natural tendency for late-season rematches to get a bit more measured suggest a slightly different rhythm. A game where both teams land in a solid scoring range, but not quite enough to push this into another foul-fueled explosion, fits the current form, the matchup, and the likely coaching mindset. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Merrimack versus Quinnipiac. Merrimack walks into Hamden like the guest nobody planned for who somehow makes the whole party more interesting. This is their second season in the new league, and they have flipped the script from preseason afterthought to league frontrunner, sitting at 17-9 overall and sitting on top of the standings, while Quinnipiac sits a little behind in third at 18-9. On the board, they are still treated like a small road underdog, with Quinnipiac framed as the comfortable home favorite, but the way these two teams have actually played tells a different story emotionally and on the floor. Merrimack has matched its straight-up record with the same 17-9 mark against the number, which is not easy over a long season, while Quinnipiac sits at a very average 13-13 against the spread and has stumbled to 3-7 against the number in its last 10, even though it has won 6 of those games outright. That is the kind of split that tells you a team is winning, but not really living up to the sticker price that sportsbooks keep slapping on them. The Warriors, on the other hand, keep punching above their weight class in the market, and that matters when you are trying to figure out who is more likely to hang around in a tight conference game. They already handled Quinnipiac in the first meeting, winning 83-71 at home as a small underdog and never really looking like the fragile side. That game was not about luck at the stripe in the final minute. It was about Merrimack standing toe-to-toe with a good offense, then walking them down in the second half. What makes this matchup interesting is the clash of personalities more than anything written on a whiteboard. Quinnipiac wants to play free and confident, scoring in the mid-70s on average, shooting in the mid-40s from the field and right around the mid-30s from deep, and they like the feeling of putting pressure on opponents with that steady scoring rhythm. Merrimack comes in averaging closer to the high 60s on offense and allowing about the same, but they do it with a defense that forces opponents into about 42% shooting overall and under 30% from 3. That deliberate, disruptive zone is their signature, and it has been talked about for years as a scheme that makes every possession feel like it lasts a little too long for opposing guards. They grind games down to roughly 66 possessions per night, which sits way down the national list, while Quinnipiac lives closer to 72 trips, which feels a lot more open and lighter. On the road, defense and poise tend to travel better than streaky jump shooting, and Merrimack has leaned into that, going 8-2 straight up and 8-2 against the spread in its last 10 outings, with a 25-point blowout win at Marist on the road as the loudest example of what happens when their style really lands. Quinnipiac still has the talent and the home crowd, sure, but Merrimack is the one that has actually been delivering against expectations, and both sides are expected to have their normal rotations available with no major injury news reshaping the matchup. In a game where everyone else in the league is chasing the Warriors, yet oddsmakers are still pricing them like a supporting character, the more reliable side to stay inside the number is the road team that already proved it can solve this particular opponent's puzzle. As our first pick for this matchup, the Merrimack Warriors to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Quinnipiac games tend to feel more open, with their scoring sitting in the mid-70s and their defense allowing points in the low 70s, so a lot of their nights end up looking lively on the scoreboard. Merrimack lives in a much tighter band, scoring in the high 60s and allowing just over 67, which naturally pulls totals downward. That is not just a numbers thing, it is a personality thing, a kind of stubbornness about slowing everything down and forcing you to feel every possession. Here is the thing, pace quietly drives a lot of totals, and the contrast here is pretty clear. Merrimack plays around 66 possessions a game, one of the slower tempos in the country, while Quinnipiac plays around 71.9, which is more free-flowing but not pure track meet stuff. If the Warriors tug this game toward their comfort zone, and their defense is built exactly for that, the total number of trips up and down the floor shrinks, and suddenly both teams have fewer chances to rack up points. When you look at how the betting markets have treated them all season, it fits the same pattern. Merrimack has gone 8-18 to the under, and Quinnipiac has gone 10-16 to the under, so both teams have been playing in environments where the actual scores keep landing below what the books were expecting. The first meeting did fly higher, largely because Merrimack erupted offensively at home, but that performance looks more like a one-night spike than a new personality trait for a team that usually leans on defense and patience to win. February basketball in conference play often tightens the screws a little bit, and this spot has that feel. Quinnipiac is not far removed from that road win at Siena where they locked in defensively, held Siena to poor shooting and just a handful of made threes, and proved they can win a game that feels more like a grind than a showcase. Now they see the league leader that beat them already. The film is fresh for both coaches. And that usually means more half-court chess, more timeouts, and fewer carefree early clock threes just for the vibe. Merrimack's shape-shifting zone naturally eats time, forcing extra passes, fake drives, kickouts, then resets, and that kind of possession, repeated over and over, pulls a game downward on the scoreboard almost without you noticing in the moment. With no major injury swings changing rotations, both teams treating this like a statement game, and both trending toward lower than expected totals all season, the most reasonable expectation is for a controlled, relatively lower scoring battle rather than a pure shootout script. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed. Subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them. So leave a comment down below and do let us know.